While speculation continues about a possible Oprah presidential bid, President Trump is defending his mental fitness for the office. Here's Major Garrett.
The people in the White House are like everybody else in the country. What's going to happen here? We don't know from day to day.
On CBS this morning, author Michael Wolff said there are times when members of President Trump's inner circle are so alarmed by his unpredictability and temper, they wonder if they should take extraordinary measures.
They don't say the cabinet is going to remove the president, but they do say things like, this is a little 25th Amendment here.
Under the 25th Amendment, if a majority of a president's cabinet and the vice president agree the president is mentally unfit, a president can be removed from office. If the president objects, 2/3 of the House and Senate must support removal. White House insiders flatly deny Wolff's report that they talk about the president's mental fitness. Over the weekend, Mr. Trump described himself as a very stable genius and trumpeted his mental acuity.
I was a very excellent student, came out, made billions and billions of dollars, became one of the top business people, went to television, and for 10 years was a tremendous success, as you probably have heard. Ran for president one time and won.
Senator Lindsey Graham ran against Mr. Trump and lost.
I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office.
And has since changed his mind.
You know what concerns me about the American press is this endless attempt to label the guy as some kind of kook, not fit to be president.
We have a copy of Fire and Fury at the store for you.
Wolff's book, Fire and Fury, is flying off the shelves, but he is not the first to raise questions about Mr. Trump's mental health. In this 2016 book about Mr. Trump's mental competency, numerous psychologists and therapists argue delusional levels of grandiosity, impulsivity, and the compulsions of mental impairment, when combined with an authoritarian cult of personality and contempt for the rule of law, are a toxic mix. The authors of that book admit they diagnosed from a distance, doing so, they said, out of an ethical obligation to warn the country. President Trump will receive his first full physical as commander-in-chief Friday, and Elaine, a mental examination will not be part of that process.
Well, Major, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders has called Wolff's book complete fantasy, and White House advisor Stephen Miller says it is a grotesque work of fiction. I'm wondering, in your private conversations with White House officials, have you heard anything regarding the 25th Amendment?
No, not at any serious level at all. There is one person who, when he was in the White House, thought that this might be a real deal, and since leaving the White House has kind of fanned the flames, the fire and fury, if you will, about this. And that's Steve Bannon. Absolutely, Elaine. You knew it before I even said it, okay? There is, within that claque of people around Steve Bannon, this sense that the president just can't handle it. And the benefactor, or someone who benefits from that particular line of reasoning, whatever you think of it, is, of course, Steve Bannon. Because if the president can't handle it, the only reason he was able to handle it, again, if you follow this particular line of reasoning, is because Steve Bannon was there as the intellectual fulcrum of the Trump campaign and then the early successes of the Trump presidency. Well, there are plenty of people here who would say, if you look at the first 6 months of the Trump presidency and compare it with the second 6 months, the second would be more successful than the first because of many factors, among them the departure of Steve Bannon, the more rigorous process of either access to the president or the methods by which decisions were brought to the president by the new chief of staff, John Kelly. But here at the White House, outside of when he was here, the sort of Bannon universe, and on the outside, the smaller, and now very much smaller Bannon universe, that's where that idea comes from.
Major, on another topic, you've reported President Trump's legal team has had specific discussions with special counsel Robert Mueller's team about the legal standard for interviewing a president. What more can you tell us about those discussions?
They occurred on December 22nd, a lengthy meeting. Robert Mueller was there, as were his top investigators and all the president's top attorneys. And it was a general discussion about the parameters of whether or not an interview would be necessary in the course of this investigation. Mueller's team conveyed that they very much thought it would be. President Trump's legal team said, all right, there's a legal standard, and it's prescribed in law. It's actually a result of the Mike Espy independent counsel case, for those of us in our audience who might be curious Googling that. And some of the standards are you can't get the information any other way. It has to be relevant specifically to the scope of the investigation, and that the president can assert some areas to protect himself. So all of these things were discussed. There is a sense on the president's legal team that at some time, possibly in the next 3 or 4 weeks, maybe sooner, maybe later, an interview of some kind will occur. One of the interesting backdrops for this interview, should it occur, Elaine, is the way the FBI conducted its interview with Hillary Clinton as it was wrapping up its investigation into her home-brewed server. Several attorneys were present. It wasn't under oath. No recording was made, and no notes were taken. That is a kind of interview process that this chief executive, and I'm going to guarantee you every future chief executive who might find himself or herself in this circumstance, will remind every federal investigator of. Because that standard, that Hillary Clinton standard, had never been seen before, and it gives anyone being questioned at this upper echelon of government a lot of leeway as to who's there, what's recorded, what's under oath, and what isn't. And all of those underlying specifics, very important to how this interview will take place, are part of this conversation.
All right, Major Garrett at the White House. Major, thank you.
Sure.